They laughed when I said I had a gift too. Then I placed the key on the table. The sound of their laughter still echoed in the formal dining room of Grandmother Evelyn's estate as I reached into my purse with trembling fingers. My cousins Marcus and Sophia had just finished presenting their elaborate gifts to the family. Marcus with his architectural plans for converting the estate into luxury condominiums. Sophia with her detailed proposal for selling the property to developers who would tear it down and build a shopping complex. Both presentations had been met with enthusiastic applause from the assembled relatives. Uncle Richard had clapped Marcus on the shoulder, praising his business acumen. Aunt Patricia had gushed over Sophia's practical thinking and modern sensibilities. Even my own mother had nodded approvingly, though I caught her shooting me nervous glances throughout the presentations. We were gathered here, all 12 members of Grandmother Evelyn's family, for the reading of her will. She had passed away 3 weeks ago at the age of 94, leaving behind this sprawling Victorian mansion, a considerable fortune, and very specific instructions about how her estate should be handled. The lawyer, Mr. Harrison, had read through the standard bequests, jewelry to the granddaughters, personal effects to the daughters, modest cash gifts to various relatives. But then came the surprise. Grandmother Evelyn had left the decision about the house and the bulk of her estate to her grandchildren. Marcus, Sophia, and myself were to present our visions for the property, and the family would vote on which proposal to accept. The winner would inherit not just the house, but the $3 million in assets that came with it. I was 29 years old, the youngest of the 3 grandchildren, and by far the least successful by my family's standards. While Marcus had built a thriving architecture firm and Sophia had made a fortune in real estate development. I worked as a librarian at the local historical society. I lived in a small apartment above a bookstore, drove a 15-year-old Honda, and had never shown any interest in the kind of wealth accumulation that my family prized. So when I stood up and said quietly, "I have a gift too," the reaction was immediate and predictable. Marcus snorted. "What, a book report on the historical significance of Victorian architecture?" Sophia giggled. "Or maybe a PowerPoint presentation about turning the house into a library." "How charmingly impractical." Uncle Richard chuckled indulgently. "Now, Emma, I'm sure you have some lovely ideas, but we need to think about this practically. This property is worth millions. We can't let sentiment cloud our judgment." "Emma's always been the dreamer of the family," Aunt Patricia added, with false sweetness. "But dreams don't pay property taxes or maintenance costs." Even my mother looked embarrassed. "Sweetheart, maybe you should just listen to what Marcus and Sophia have proposed. They've put a lot of thought into this." But I had put thought into this too. More thought than any of them realized. I reached into my purse and pulled out an ornate brass key, tarnished with age but still beautiful. The metal was warm in my palm, as if it had been waiting for this moment. I placed it gently on the mahogany dining table, right in the center where everyone could see it. The laughter died immediately. "Where did you get that?" Uncle Richard asked, his voice suddenly sharp. "Grandmother gave it to me," I said quietly. 3 months before she died, she asked me to keep it safe and to bring it here today. Mr. Harrison, the lawyer, leaned forward in his chair. His face had gone pale. "Miss Emma, may I see that key?" I slid it across the table to him. He examined it carefully, turning it over in his hands, studying the intricate engravings along its length. This is the key mentioned in the sealed addendum to Mrs. Whitmore's will," he said slowly. "The one I was instructed to open only if this specific key was presented." "What addendum?" Marcus demanded. "You didn't mention any addendum, because I was instructed not to, unless this key appeared." Mr. Harrison reached into his briefcase and withdrew a sealed envelope, yellowed with age. "Mrs. Whitmore gave me this envelope 15 years ago, along with very specific instructions. I was to keep it sealed unless someone presented this key at the reading of her will." Sophia's face had gone from amused to alarmed. "That's impossible. Grandmother never said anything about a key or a sealed addendum." "She said something to me," I said quietly. 3 months ago, when I was visiting her in the hospital, she was very weak. but she was lucid. She told me that she had been watching all of us, all her grandchildren, and that she had made a decision about who truly understood what this house meant. What did she say? My mother asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She said that Marcus saw the house as an investment opportunity, that Sophia saw it as a development project, but that I saw it as a home, as a piece of history, as something worth preserving. I looked around the table at my family's shocked faces. She said that she had been testing us, watching how we treated the house and each other, and that she had already decided who should inherit everything. Mr. Harrison broke the seal on the envelope with careful fingers. Inside were several pages of legal documents, written in Grandmother Evelyn's careful handwriting and properly notarized. "This is a complete revision of the will," he said, scanning the pages quickly. "Dated 18 months ago and properly witnessed, it supersedes everything I read earlier." "What does it say?" Uncle Richard asked, though his tone suggested he already suspected he wouldn't like the answer. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat and began to read. "I, Evelyn Margaret Whitmore, being of sound mind and body, do hereby revise my last will and testament. After careful observation of my family over many years, I have determined that only one person truly understands the value of preserving history and maintaining family legacy." He paused and looked directly at me. "To my granddaughter Emma Rose Whitmore, who has spent countless hours in my home not calculating its monetary value, but appreciating its stories. Who has listened to my tales of family history with genuine interest. Who has helped me maintain the gardens and preserve the family photographs and understand the importance of keeping the past alive for future generations. I leave my entire estate." The silence that followed was deafening. The house, the investments, the family heirlooms, the trust fund, everything goes to Emma. With one condition, that she preserve the house as a family home and historical landmark, and that she use the resources to maintain it properly for future generations. Marcus stood up so quickly, his chair fell backward. "This is ridiculous. Emma can't possibly manage a property like this. She doesn't have the business experience or the financial knowledge. She doesn't even have a real job," Sophia added, her voice shrill with disbelief. "She works part-time at a dusty old historical society. How is she supposed to maintain a $3 million estate?" "Perhaps," Mr. Harrison said mildly. Mrs. Whitmore believed that Emma's experience with historical preservation and her genuine love for the property made her the ideal choice. I sat in stunned silence, trying to process what I was hearing. Grandmother Evelyn had left me everything. Not just the house, but the entire fortune that came with it. She had been watching us, testing us, and she had chosen me. "There's more," Mr. Harrison continued. "Mrs. Whitmore also left detailed instructions about how the estate should be managed. Emma is to receive a monthly stipend from the trust fund to cover living expenses and property maintenance. She is also to establish a small museum in the east wing of the house, showcasing the family's history and the Victorian era. The property is to be opened for historical tours twice a month, with proceeds going to local historical preservation efforts." "A museum," Aunt Patricia sputtered. "She wants to turn our family home into a tourist attraction." "She wants to preserve it," I said, finding my voice for the first time since Mr. Harrison had started reading. "She wants to make sure that future generations can learn from it, appreciate it, understand what life was like in a different era." "This is insane," Marcus said, beginning to pace around the room. "Emma, you can't seriously be considering this. You don't know the first thing about managing property or investments." "I know about preserving history," I said quietly. "I know about maintaining old buildings and caring for antique furniture and keeping family stories alive. I know about research and documentation and creating educational programs. But do you know about property taxes and insurance and maintenance contracts?" Sophia demanded. "Do you know about investment portfolios and trust fund management?" "I can learn." And grandmother apparently thought I was capable of learning. Uncle Richard sat down heavily, his face red with frustration. "Emma, be reasonable. This house requires tens of thousands of dollars in maintenance every year. The property taxes alone are more than you make in a year at that little job of yours. Which is why grandmother set up the trust fund to cover those expenses, I pointed out. But what about the rest of us? Aunt Patricia asked, her voice taking on a wheedling tone. What about Marcus and Sophia? They're her grandchildren too. Surely she didn't mean to cut them out entirely. Mr. Harrison consulted the documents again. Actually, she did address that. She wrote, "I am not leaving Marcus and Sophia without resources. They have both built successful careers and accumulated considerable wealth on their own. They do not need my money to live comfortably. Emma, however, has chosen a path of service and preservation over profit, and she deserves to be supported in that choice." I felt tears welling up in my eyes. Grandmother Evelyn had understood me in a way that the rest of my family never had. She had seen value in my choices, even when everyone else saw them as failures. "There's one final provision," Mr. Harrison said. "If Emma chooses to accept this inheritance, she must live in the house full-time and commit to maintaining it as specified for a minimum of 10 years. If she sells the property or fails to maintain it according to the guidelines, the entire estate reverts to a historical preservation trust." The room fell silent again as everyone processed this information. "Well," my mother asked finally, "Emma, what are you going to do?" I looked around the dining room where we were sitting, taking in the hand-carved wainscoting, the original crystal chandelier, the built-in china cabinet filled with dishes that had been in our family for generations. I thought about the library upstairs with its floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and rolling ladder, the conservatory filled with plants that grandmother had tended for decades, the third-floor rooms where family photographs and documents were stored in careful archives. This house wasn't just a piece of real estate. It was a repository of family history, a work of architectural art. A tangible connection to the past that would be lost forever if it was torn down or converted into condominiums. "I accept," I said quietly. The explosion of protests was immediate and overwhelming. Marcus accused me of manipulating grandmother Evelyn. Sophia threatened to contest the will. Uncle Richard demanded to know how I planned to manage such a large inheritance. Aunt Patricia suggested that I was being selfish and impractical. But through it all, I kept thinking about the conversations I'd had with grandmother Evelyn over the years. The hours we'd spent in her garden while she told me stories about each plant and where it had come from. The afternoons in her library while she showed me family photographs and explained who each person was and how they were related. The evenings in her kitchen while she taught me her recipes and told me about the dinner parties she'd hosted in the formal dining room. She had been preparing me for this moment, I realized. All those visits, all those stories, all those lessons about caring for old things and preserving family history, she had been training me to be the guardian of our family's legacy. "I know this is unexpected," I said when the shouting finally died down. "I know you all think I'm not qualified for this responsibility, but grandmother Evelyn believed in me, and I'm not going to let her down." "Emma," my mother said gently, "are you sure about this? It's a huge responsibility. You'll be giving up your independence, your freedom to make your own choices about where to live and how to spend your time." "I'll be gaining something more important," I said. "I'll be preserving something irreplaceable. I'll be honoring grandmother's wishes and making sure that future generations can learn from our family's history." Marcus threw his hands up in frustration. "Fine, make your romantic gesture. But don't come crying to us when you realize you're in over your head." "I won't," I said quietly, "because I'm not going to fail." As the family began to file out of the dining room, still muttering complaints and threats to contest the will, Mr. Harrison approached me. "Miss Emma, I want you to know that your grandmother spoke about you often in the months before her death. She was very proud of your work at the Historical Society and your dedication to preserving the past. She believed you were the only one who truly understood what this house represents." "Thank you," I said, picking up the brass key from the table. "Do you know what this key opens?" Mr. Harrison smiled. "I believe you'll find that out soon enough. Your grandmother left very detailed instructions about the house and its secrets." There's a lot more to discover than what you've seen so far. As I stood alone in the dining room, holding the key that had changed everything, I felt a mixture of excitement and terror. I was now the owner of a $3 million estate, responsible for preserving a piece of history and honoring my grandmother's legacy. But I was also finally free to be who I had always wanted to be, a guardian of the past, a keeper of stories, a bridge between what was and what could be. The key felt warm in my hand, and I had the strangest feeling that Grandmother Evelyn was watching me, smiling with approval at the choice I had made. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of moving into the house and discovering all its secrets. Tonight, I would sit in the garden she had loved and plan how to turn her vision into reality. The laughter had stopped, but my real work was just beginning. I spent my first night in Grandmother Evelyn's house, my house now lying awake in the master bedroom, listening to the old Victorian settle around me like a living thing. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind through the eaves, every distant sound from the street seemed magnified in the darkness. I had stayed in this house countless times over the years, but sleeping here as the owner felt entirely different. The brass key sat on the nightstand beside me, catching moonlight from the tall windows. I had tried it in several locks throughout the house during my initial exploration that afternoon, but none had fit. Whatever it opened remained a mystery, though I suspected Grandmother Evelyn had intended it that way. The house felt enormous around me, 15 rooms spread across 3 floors, plus the basement and attic spaces I had barely begun to explore. The responsibility of it all pressed down on me like a weight. How was I supposed to maintain this place? How was I supposed to transform it into the museum and educational center that Grandmother had envisioned? My phone had been buzzing all evening with calls and texts from family members, most of them variations on the same theme. Are you sure about this? It's not too late to change your mind. You're making a huge mistake. Only my mother had called to offer support, though even she sounded worried. Emma, honey, I want you to know that I'm proud of you for following your heart, she had said, but I'm also scared. This is such a big responsibility, and you'll be all alone in that big house. I won't be alone, I had told her. I'll have Grandmother's spirit with me, and all the stories and memories she left behind. That's very poetic, sweetheart. But spirits don't pay utility bills or fix leaky roofs. She wasn't wrong. The practical realities of my inheritance were daunting. Mr. Harrison had given me a thick folder of documents, insurance policies, maintenance contracts, financial statements, property tax records. The monthly expenses for the house were more than I had made in an entire year at the Historical Society. But Grandmother had planned for that too. The trust fund she had established would provide me with a monthly stipend of $8,000, more money than I had ever had access to in my life. It was enough to cover the house's expenses and provide me with a comfortable living as long as I was careful with it. The next morning, I woke early and began a systematic exploration of the house, armed with a notebook and the brass key. I wanted to understand every room, every closet, every hidden space before I began planning the museum conversion. The house was a masterpiece of Victorian architecture. Built in 1887 by my great-great-grandfather, a successful textile merchant. It had been in our family for over a century, passed down through generations of Whitmores who had each added their own touches while respecting the original design. The main floor contained the formal rooms, the parlor with its elaborate wallpaper and horsehair furniture, the dining room where yesterday's drama had unfolded, the library with its thousands of books, and the conservatory filled with exotic plants that Grandmother had collected from around the world. The second floor held the family bedrooms, each one decorated in a different style, reflecting the era when it had been occupied. The master bedroom where I had slept was done in deep blues and golds, with heavy velvet curtains and a 4-poster bed that had belonged to my great-grandmother. But it was on the 3rd floor that I made my first real discovery. I had been exploring what I thought was a storage room when I noticed something odd about the proportions. The room seemed smaller than it should be, given the size of the rooms below it. I ran my hands along the walls, looking for hidden panels or secret doors, the kind of thing that Victorian houses were famous for. That's when I found it, a section of wainscoting that moved when I pressed on it, revealing a narrow door hidden behind the wood paneling. My heart racing, I tried the brass key in the lock. It fit perfectly. The door opened onto a small, windowless room that had clearly been used as a study or office. But this wasn't just any office, it was a shrine to our family's history. The walls were lined with filing cabinets, and every surface was covered with photographs, documents, and artifacts that I had never seen before. There was a desk in the center of the room, and on it was a leather-bound journal with my name written on the cover in Grandmother Evelyn's handwriting. With trembling hands, I opened the journal and began to read. My dearest Emma, if you are reading this, then you have accepted the responsibility I have placed on your shoulders, and you have found the key to our family's true treasure. This room contains the real history of the Whitmore family, not just the sanitized version we present to the world, but the complete story, with all its triumphs and tragedies, secrets and scandals. I have spent the last 30 years of my life collecting and preserving these materials, knowing that someday I would need to pass them on to someone who would understand their value. You are that person, Emma. You are the keeper of our stories now. I spent the rest of the morning in that hidden room, reading through documents that revealed aspects of our family history I had never known. There were letters from ancestors who had fought in the Civil War, business records from the textile company that had built our fortune, photographs of family members who had been erased from the official family tree for various scandals and indiscretions. But the most shocking discovery was a series of documents related to the Underground Railroad. Apparently, our house had been a stop on the network that helped enslaved people escape to freedom in the 1850s and 1860s. The basement contained a hidden room that had been used to shelter refugees, and there were detailed records of the people who had been helped and the risks our ancestors had taken to assist them. This wasn't just family history, this was American history. This house wasn't just architecturally significant, it was historically significant in ways that I had never imagined. I understood now why Grandmother Evelyn had been so determined to preserve the house. It wasn't just about maintaining a beautiful building or honoring family tradition. It was about preserving a piece of history that could educate people about the courage and compassion of ordinary citizens who had risked everything to do what was right. My phone rang, interrupting my research. It was Marcus. Emma, we need to talk, he said without preamble. I've been thinking about this situation, and I have a proposition for you. What kind of proposition? I'm willing to buy the house from you. I'll pay you fair market value, $3.5 million. You can take the money, invest it wisely, and live comfortably for the rest of your life without the burden of maintaining that old house. Marcus, I can't sell the house. The will specifically states that if I sell it, everything reverts to a historical preservation trust. There are ways around that. Legal loopholes. I've been talking to some lawyers, and they think we can challenge the will on the grounds that Grandmother wasn't of sound mind when she wrote it. I felt anger rising in my chest. Grandmother was completely lucid when she made these decisions. She knew exactly what she was doing. Emma, be reasonable. You can't possibly want to spend the rest of your life trapped in that house, playing dress-up with old furniture and giving tours to tourists. I'm not trapped, Marcus. I'm honored. Grandmother trusted me with something precious, and I'm not going to betray that trust. You're making a mistake, a huge mistake. And when you realize it, don't expect the family to bail you out. After he hung up, I sat in the hidden room surrounded by our family's secrets and felt more determined than ever to honor Grandmother Evelyn's wishes. This house, this history, these stories, they were worth preserving, regardless of what my family thought. That afternoon, I called the Historical Society, where I had worked, and gave my notice. My supervisor, Dr. Margaret Chen, was surprised but supportive. I always knew you were destined for something bigger than our little organization, she said. But I hope you'll consider partnering with us on some projects. What you're planning sounds like exactly the kind of community education program we've been wanting to develop. I'd love to partner with you, I said. In fact, I'm hoping you might be willing to help me plan the museum conversion. I'm going to need expertise in exhibit design and educational programming. I would be delighted to help. When can we start? How about tomorrow? That evening, I sat in grandmother's garden as the sun set behind the old oak trees, planning my next steps. I would need to hire contractors to convert the East Wing into museum space. I would need to work with historians and archivists to properly preserve and display the materials I had found. I would need to develop educational programs and marketing materials to attract visitors. It was overwhelming, but it was also exciting. For the first time in my life, I had the resources and the freedom to pursue work that truly mattered to me. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "How are you feeling, sweetheart? Any second thoughts?" I looked up at the house rising before me, its windows glowing with warm light, and typed back, "No second thoughts. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." As I headed inside for my second night as the mistress of Whitmore House, I carried the brass key in my pocket and felt Grandmother Evelyn's presence all around me. She had given me more than just a house and a fortune. She had given me a purpose, a mission, a way to make my life meaningful. The laughter from yesterday's family meeting seemed like a distant memory. My cousins could keep their development projects and investment schemes. I had something more valuable, a chance to preserve the past for the future, and the resources to do it right. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. 3 weeks into my new life at Whitmore House, I was beginning to understand the true scope of what Grandmother Evelyn had entrusted to me. Working with Dr. Chen and a team of historians from the local university, I had begun cataloging the materials in the hidden room and planning the museum conversion. But it was while exploring the basement that I made the discovery that would change everything. I had been measuring the space for potential exhibit areas when I noticed the same kind of architectural inconsistency that had led me to the hidden room upstairs. The basement seemed smaller than it should be, and there was a section of the stone wall that looked different from the rest, newer mortars, slightly different colored stones. Following my instincts, I began examining the wall more carefully. Behind a stack of old furniture that looked like it hadn't been moved in decades, I found what I was looking for. A section of wall that was actually a hidden door, cleverly disguised but accessible if you knew where to look. The door wasn't locked, but it was heavy and difficult to move. When I finally managed to push it open, I found myself looking into a narrow tunnel that disappeared into darkness. My heart pounding, I grabbed a flashlight and began to explore. The tunnel was about 6 feet high and 4 feet wide, carved directly into the earth and reinforced with stone and timber. It extended for what felt like hundreds of yards, sloping gently downward as it moved away from the house. This had to be part of the Underground Railroad network I had read about in the family documents. But the tunnel was much more extensive than anything I had imagined. After what felt like an eternity of walking through the narrow passage, I emerged into a larger chamber that had clearly been used as a hiding place. There were sleeping areas carved into the walls, storage spaces for food and supplies, and even a small well for fresh water. But the most remarkable discovery was what I found carved into the stone walls. Hundreds of names, dates, and messages left by the people who had sheltered here while escaping slavery. Some were in English, others in languages I didn't recognize. Some were just initials and dates. Others were longer messages of hope and gratitude. "Thank you for your kindness, Sarah." 1858 Freedom, "At last Moses and family." 1861 God bless the Whitmore family JT. 1859 I stood in that underground chamber, surrounded by the voices of people who had risked everything for freedom, and felt the weight of history pressing down on me. This wasn't just a family home, it was a monument to human courage and compassion. But there was more to discover. The tunnel continued beyond the chamber. And following it led me to another surprise. It emerged in the basement of what was now the town's oldest church, about half a mile from the house. The church had been built in the 1840s, and according to the historical records I had been studying, its pastor had been a known abolitionist. I had stumbled onto a piece of Underground Railroad history that was far more significant than anyone had realized. The tunnel system connecting our house to the church represented a sophisticated network that had helped hundreds of people escape slavery. This discovery changed everything about my plans for the museum. I called Dr. Chen immediately, barely able to contain my excitement as I described what I had found. "Emma, this is extraordinary," she said. "If what you're describing is authentic, and it certainly sounds like it is, this could be one of the most significant underground railroad sites ever discovered in this region. What do I need to do? How do I properly preserve and document this? We need to bring in specialists immediately. Archaeologists, historians, preservation experts. This kind of discovery requires careful study and documentation before it can be opened to the public. How long will that take? Months, possibly years. But Emma, you understand what this means, don't you? This discovery could transform your little family museum into a site of national historical significance." That evening, I called my mother to share the news. "Emma, that's incredible," she said, and I could hear the excitement in her voice. "Grandmother always said there were family stories about helping escaped slaves, but we thought they were just legends. They weren't legends. They were history. And now I have proof. Have you told Marcus and Sophia about this?" I hesitated. "Not yet. I wanted to get the experts involved first. Make sure I understand the full scope of what we're dealing with. You should tell them, sweetheart. This changes the value of the property significantly. They deserve to know." She was right, of course. But I was also worried about how my cousins would react to this news. Would they see it as validation of my decision to preserve the house, or would they see it as an opportunity to profit from the discovery? I decided to call a family meeting for the following weekend. It was time to share what I had learned and see if this discovery might change their perspective on my inheritance. The meeting was held in the same dining room where the will had been read a month earlier. But the atmosphere was entirely different. Instead of dismissive laughter, there was tension and curiosity as I explained what I had found. I had prepared a presentation with photographs of the tunnel, the hidden chamber, and the carved messages. I had also invited Dr. Chen to attend and provide expert context for the discovery. "This is remarkable," Uncle Richard said when I finished my presentation. He was studying the photographs with the kind of attention he usually reserved for financial documents. "You're saying this tunnel system is completely intact?" "As far as we can tell, yes. Dr. Chen believes it may be one of the best preserved underground railroad sites in the country." Sophia leaned forward, her business instincts clearly engaged. "What's the potential value of something like this? I mean, in terms of tourism revenue and historical significance?" Dr. Chen answered before I could. "Sites like this can attract hundreds of thousands of visitors annually. The economic impact on the local community could be substantial. Hotels, restaurants, gift shops, guided tours. We're talking about millions of dollars in annual tourism revenue." Marcus had been unusually quiet throughout the presentation, but now he spoke up. "Emma, this changes things significantly. Have you considered what this discovery means for the property value?" "I've considered what it means for the historical value," I said carefully, "which is what grandmother wanted me to focus on. But you can't ignore the financial implications. A property with this kind of historical significance could be worth 10 times what we originally thought." "Marcus, the will specifically states that I can't sell the property. The financial value is irrelevant. But the tourism revenue isn't," Sophia said. "Emma, you could be looking at a gold mine here. Properly developed, this could generate enough income to not only maintain the house, but to make you wealthy." I felt a familiar unease creeping over me. My cousins were looking at my discovery the same way they had looked at the original inheritance, as a business opportunity rather than a historical treasure. The goal isn't to make money, I said firmly. The goal is to preserve history and educate people about this important chapter in American history. Those goals aren't mutually exclusive, Marcus argued. You can preserve history and make money at the same time. In fact, the revenue from tourism could fund much better preservation efforts than you could afford otherwise. He wasn't wrong about that. The kind of preservation and interpretation that this site deserved would be expensive, far more expensive than my trust fund could cover. What are you suggesting? I asked. I'm suggesting that you let us help you, Marcus said. You have the historical knowledge and the passion for preservation. We have the business expertise and the development experience. Together, we could create something truly spectacular. Sophia nodded enthusiastically. I could handle the tourism development, visitor center, gift shop, parking facilities, marketing. Marcus could design any new construction to be historically appropriate. You could focus on the historical interpretation and educational programming. We could be partners, Marcus continued. Equal partners in developing this site properly. I looked around the table at my family's faces, seeing the same excitement and ambition that had driven their original development proposals, but this time they were talking about working with me rather than around me. I need time to think about this, I said. Of course, Uncle Richard said. But Emma, you should consider their offer seriously. This discovery is too important to handle alone. After everyone left, I sat in the garden with Dr. Chen, trying to process what had just happened. What do you think? I asked her. Are they right? Do I need their help to do this properly? Dr. Chen was quiet for a moment, considering her words carefully. Emma, your cousins aren't wrong about the scope of what you're dealing with. Developing a site like this properly requires expertise in tourism management, construction, marketing, and business development. Those aren't your areas of strength. But I'm worried about their motivations. They're seeing dollar signs, not historical significance. That's not necessarily a bad thing, as long as the historical integrity is protected. Money isn't evil, Emma. It's a tool. And in this case, it could be a tool for preserving and sharing history on a much larger scale than you could manage alone. So you think I should consider their proposal? I think you should consider all your options. But remember, you're the owner of this property. Any partnership would be on your terms, with your values and priorities driving the decisions. That night, I walked through the tunnel again, reading the messages carved into the walls by people who had risked everything for freedom. I thought about what they would want. Would they want their story told to as many people as possible, even if that meant commercializing their experience? Or would they want their story preserved quietly, respectfully, without the intrusion of gift shops and tour buses? I didn't have easy answers to those questions, but I knew that whatever I decided, it had to honor both the history I had discovered and the trust that Grandmother Evelyn had placed in me. The brass key that had started this journey sat on my nightstand, catching moonlight just as it had that first night. But now it represented something different, not just the unlocking of family secrets, but the unlocking of a piece of American history that could change how people understood the courage and sacrifice of those who fought against slavery. Tomorrow, I would begin the process of making the most important decision of my life: how to honor the past while building the future. The laughter from that first family meeting seemed like a lifetime ago. Now, my cousins were eager to work with me rather than against me, but I had to make sure that any partnership would serve the cause of history rather than the cause of profit. The weight of that responsibility felt heavier than ever, but I was no longer carrying it alone. 2 months after discovering the Underground Railroad tunnel, I found myself standing in the main parlor of Whitmore House, surrounded by architects, historians, tourism experts, and my family members, all working together to plan what would become the Whitmore Underground Railroad Heritage Site. The transformation had been remarkable, both in the house and in my relationships with my cousins. What had started as a bitter inheritance dispute had evolved into a genuine partnership, built on mutual respect and shared vision. The turning point had come when I presented my conditions for working together. I had spent weeks consulting with historians, preservation experts, and legal advisors to develop a framework that would protect the historical integrity of the site while allowing for responsible development. I'm willing to form a partnership, I had told Marcus and Sophia at our second family meeting, but it has to be on terms that honor grandmother's wishes and protect the historical significance of what we've discovered. My conditions were non-negotiable. I would retain majority ownership and final decision-making authority over all aspects of the site. Any development would have to be approved by a board of historians and preservation experts. The primary focus would always be education and historical interpretation, with tourism revenue being a secondary consideration, and most importantly, the site would be operated as a non-profit organization, with any profits being reinvested in preservation and education rather than distributed to partners. I had expected Marcus and Sophia to reject these terms, to walk away from a deal that offered them responsibility without the promise of significant financial gain. Instead, they had surprised me. Emma, Marcus had said, "I owe you an apology. When I first heard about your inheritance, I saw it as a waste of valuable resources. But this discovery, this changes everything. This is bigger than money. This is about preserving something truly important." Sophia had nodded in agreement. "I've been doing research on Underground Railroad sites, and what you've found here is extraordinary. The tourism potential is huge, yes, but more importantly, the educational impact could be transformational. I want to be part of that. Even without the financial rewards you were originally hoping for." Even without them, Marcus had said, "Some things are more important than profit margins." It was Sophia who had come up with the structure that made our partnership work. She proposed that we establish the Whitmore Foundation, a non-profit organization that would own and operate the heritage site. I would serve as executive director, with Marcus as director of development and Sophia as director of operations. We would each draw modest salaries from the foundation, but our primary compensation would be the satisfaction of preserving and sharing an important piece of history. The foundation model also solved the legal issues around grandmother's will. Since I wasn't selling the property, but rather donating it to a non-profit organization that I controlled, the terms of the inheritance were satisfied while still allowing for the kind of professional development the site required. Working with my cousins had been a revelation. Marcus's architectural expertise was invaluable in designing visitor facilities that complemented the historical character of the house. He had proposed a visitor center that would be built into the hillside behind the house, almost invisible from the street, but providing all the modern amenities that tourists expected: parking, restrooms, gift shop, and orientation theater. Sophia's business acumen was equally important. She had developed a comprehensive marketing plan that would attract visitors. While maintaining the site's educational focus, she had also negotiated partnerships with hotels, restaurants, and other local businesses that would benefit from increased tourism while supporting the site's mission. But perhaps most importantly, working together had healed the rift in our family. The bitter resentment that had characterized our relationships since the will reading had been replaced by mutual respect and shared purpose. "You know," Sophia had said to me just the week before, "I think grandmother planned this all along." "What do you mean?" "I think she knew about the tunnel. I think she knew that discovering it would bring us together and force us to work as a team. She was always 3 steps ahead of everyone else." I had been thinking the same thing. The more I learned about Grandmother Evelyn's careful planning, the more convinced I became that she had orchestrated events to achieve exactly this outcome. She had given me the inheritance to ensure that the house would be preserved, but she had also created circumstances that would eventually bring the whole family together in support of that preservation. The official opening of the Whitmore Underground Railroad Heritage Site was scheduled for the following spring, almost exactly 1 year after grandmother's death. But we had already begun offering limited tours to historians, educators, and preservation experts. And the response had been overwhelming. Dr. James Washington, a professor of African American history at Howard University, had called it one of the most significant Underground Railroad discoveries of the past 50 years. The National Park Service had expressed interest in designating it as a National Historic Landmark. The Smithsonian had inquired about borrowing some of our artifacts for a traveling exhibition. But the moment that meant the most to me came during a visit from Mrs. Dorothy Jenkins, an elderly woman whose great-great-grandmother had escaped slavery through the Underground Railroad in the 1850s. My family has stories about a big white house with kind people who helped runaways. She had told me as we stood in the underground chamber. We never knew exactly where it was, but the stories described a tunnel that led to a church. I think this might be the place. She had spent an hour in the chamber, reading the carved messages and looking for any sign of her ancestors' presence. When she found the initials MJ 1857 carved into the wall near one of the sleeping alcoves, she had broken down in tears. "That could be her," she had whispered. "Mary Jenkins." The dates match and the location matches, the family stories. I think I'm standing where my great-great-grandmother slept on her journey to freedom. That moment had crystallized for me why this work was so important. This wasn't just about preserving old buildings or attracting tourists. This was about honoring the courage of people who had risked everything for freedom and connecting their descendants to that legacy. The success of the heritage site had also brought unexpected recognition to my work. I had been invited to speak at conferences on historical preservation and Underground Railroad research. The State Historical Society had offered me a position on their board of directors. A publisher had approached me about writing a book about the discovery and the preservation process. But perhaps most satisfying was the change in how my family viewed my career choices. The same relatives who had dismissed my work at the Historical Society as impractical were now praising my expertise and vision. Uncle Richard had even admitted that he had been wrong to question grandmother's decision. "You've proven that preserving history can be just as valuable as any business venture," he had told me. "Maybe more valuable, because the impact lasts for generations." As I stood in the parlor that evening, watching my family and colleagues work together to plan the site's future, I felt a deep sense of gratitude to Grandmother Evelyn. She had given me more than just a house and a fortune. She had given me a purpose, a mission, and the resources to pursue it. The brass key that had started this journey now sat in a place of honor in the museum's main exhibit. Along with a placard explaining its significance, this key is given to Emma Whitmore by her grandmother just months before her death. Unlocked not just a hidden room, but a hidden piece of American history. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Saw the article about the heritage site in the newspaper. So proud of you, sweetheart. Grandmother would be thrilled." I looked around the room at the evidence of what we had accomplished together. The architectural plans, the educational materials, the marketing brochures, the historical research. A year ago, my family had laughed when I said I had a gift too. Now they understood that my gift wasn't just the brass key, but the vision to see the true value of what we had inherited. The laughter had been replaced by respect, the division by collaboration, the competition by cooperation. And at the center of it all was a piece of history that would educate and inspire visitors for generations to come. Grandmother Evelyn's plan had worked perfectly. 1 year later, on a crisp October morning that perfectly matched the day of Grandmother Evelyn's funeral, I stood on the front steps of Whitmore House watching the first official tour group of the day make their way up the brick walkway. The Whitmore Underground Railroad Heritage Site had been open to the public for 6 months, and the response had exceeded our most optimistic projections. We were hosting over 1,000 visitors per month, with bookings extending well into the following year. More importantly, the educational impact was everything I had hoped for, and more. The tour group approaching the house was typical of our visitors, a mix of families, history enthusiasts, and school groups, all eager to learn about this hidden chapter of American history. Today's group included a class of 8th graders from the local middle school, their teacher having scheduled the visit as part of their unit on the Civil War and abolition. I watched as Marcus emerged from the visitor center to greet the group. He had embraced his role as director of development with the same passion he had once reserved for commercial projects. But now, his enthusiasm was directed toward preserving history rather than maximizing profits. "Welcome to the Whitmore Underground Railroad Heritage Site," he said to the assembled visitors. "You're about to experience one of the most significant Underground Railroad locations ever discovered. And you'll hear the stories of the brave men and women who risked everything for freedom." Sophia appeared beside me on the steps, tablet in hand as she coordinated the day's activities. Her transformation had been perhaps the most remarkable of all. The woman who had once proposed tearing down the house to build a shopping center was now one of the most passionate advocates for historical preservation I had ever met. "The afternoon tour is completely booked," she told me, "and we have 3 school groups scheduled for next week. Oh, and the documentary crew from PBS wants to schedule a follow-up interview with you for their series on the Underground Railroad. Any word from the National Park Service about the landmark designation? They're sending a team next month for the final evaluation. Dr. Chen thinks we're almost certain to get it. The National Historic Landmark designation would be the culmination of everything we had worked toward. It would provide federal protection for the site and access to preservation grants that would ensure its long-term sustainability." As the tour group entered the house, I followed them inside, listening as Marcus began his presentation in the main parlor. He had become an excellent tour guide, combining his architectural knowledge with the historical research we had conducted over the past year. This house was built in 1887 by the Whitmore family. He was telling the visitors, but its most important chapter began much earlier, in the 1850s, when it served as a crucial stop on the Underground Railroad. I slipped away from the tour and made my way to the hidden room on the 3rd floor, now converted into a research center where scholars from around the country came to study our archives. Dr. Chen was there, working with a graduate student to catalog some recently discovered documents. "Emma, perfect timing," she said when she saw me. "We just found something remarkable in the church archives. Look at this." She handed me a letter dated 1862, written by the pastor of the church connected to our tunnel system. In it, he described the network of safe houses and the families who had risked their lives to help escaping slaves. "The Whitmore family has been instrumental in our efforts," the letter read. "Their house serves not only as a refuge, but as a symbol of hope for those seeking freedom. Mrs. Elizabeth Whitmore has personally cared for dozens of refugees, and her courage in the face of danger has inspired our entire community." "Elizabeth Whitmore," I said, recognizing the name that was my great-great-grandmother. "The more we research, the more we discover about your family's involvement in the Underground Railroad. They weren't just providing shelter, they were leaders in the local abolitionist movement." I thought about Grandmother Evelyn and wondered how much she had known about this legacy when she made her decision about the inheritance. Had she understood that she was entrusting me with more than just a house, but with a family tradition of standing up for what was right? My phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. When I answered, a woman's voice said, "Is this Emma Whitmore? My name is Dr. Sarah Thompson, and I'm calling from the African American History Museum in Washington, D.C. We'd like to discuss featuring your site in our upcoming exhibition on the Underground Railroad." After I finished the call, I walked down to the basement to check on the afternoon's special tour, a group of descendants of people who had escaped slavery through the Underground Railroad. These tours were always the most emotional and meaningful, connecting people to their family histories in ways that no textbook ever could. Mrs. Dorothy Jenkins was there again, serving as a volunteer guide. She had become one of our most valued team members, sharing her family's oral histories and helping other descendants trace their connections to the site. "Emma," she called when she saw me, "I want you to meet someone special. This is my great-nephew, Marcus Jenkins. He's a filmmaker, and he's working on a documentary about Underground Railroad sites." The young man stepped forward and shook my hand. "Ms. Whitmore, what you've accomplished here is incredible. I visited Underground Railroad sites all over the country, and this is by far the most complete and well-preserved example I've seen. Thank you. We've tried to honor the history while making it accessible to modern visitors. I'd love to include your site in my documentary, if you're interested. I think your story about discovering this history and transforming it into an educational resource is just as important as the historical events themselves. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself reflecting on the journey that had brought me to this point. A year and a half ago, I had been a part-time librarian living in a small apartment, dismissed by my family as impractical and unrealistic. Now I was the director of a nationally recognized historical site, working with scholars and filmmakers and government officials to preserve and share an important piece of American history. But more than that, I had found my purpose. Every day brought new discoveries, new connections, new opportunities to educate people about the courage and sacrifice of those who had fought against slavery. The work was challenging and sometimes overwhelming, but it was also deeply fulfilling in ways I had never experienced before. That evening, after the last tour had ended and the visitors had departed, I sat in Grandmother Evelyn's garden with my mother, who had driven up from the city to attend the anniversary commemoration we had planned for the following day. I've been thinking about what Grandmother would say if she could see all this, I told her, gesturing toward the house that now bustled with activity during the day, but settled into peaceful quiet each evening. I think she'd be proud, Mom said, not just of what you've accomplished, but of how you've brought the family together. Marcus and Sophia have both grown so much through this process. It was true. Working on the heritage site had changed all of us. Marcus had discovered a passion for historical preservation that had led him to specialize in heritage tourism projects. Sophia had started a consulting firm focused on developing educational tourism sites. Even Uncle Richard and Aunt Patricia had become regular volunteers, helping with special events and fundraising activities. Do you ever regret it? Mom asked, giving up your independence to take on all this responsibility. I thought about the question, did I regret accepting Grandmother's inheritance and all the obligations that came with it? Never, I said. This work gives my life meaning in a way that nothing else ever has. I wake up every morning knowing that I'm preserving something important, sharing stories that need to be told, honoring people who deserve to be remembered, and the family situation. Are you happy with how that's worked out? I smiled, thinking about the transformation in my relationships with Marcus and Sophia. We're closer now than we've ever been. Working together toward a common goal has shown us the best in each other rather than the worst. As the sun set behind the old oak trees, I walked through the house one more time, checking that everything was secure for the night. In the main parlor, I paused to look at the portrait of Grandmother Evelyn that we had hung in a place of honor. She was smiling in the painting, and I had the fanciful notion that she was pleased with what we had accomplished. The brass key that had started this journey was displayed in a case nearby, along with other artifacts from the Underground Railroad era. But I had kept a replica for myself, and I carried it in my pocket as a reminder of the moment when everything changed. Tomorrow would mark exactly 1 year since Grandmother's death, and we had planned a special commemoration to honor her memory and celebrate what the heritage site had become. Local officials would be there, along with historians, preservationists, and many of the descendants who had connected with the site over the past year. But tonight, it was just me and the house and the stories it contained. I climbed the stairs to the master bedroom, thinking about all the people who had slept in this house over the years, family members and refugees, visitors and residents, all of them part of the continuing story of Whitmore House. As I prepared for bed, I found myself thinking about the letter I had received that morning from a teacher in Alabama whose class had visited our website and learned about the Underground Railroad through our virtual tour program. She had written to tell me that several of her students had been inspired to research their own family histories, and one had discovered that his great-great-great-grandfather had been helped by the Underground Railroad. Your site has opened up a whole new understanding of history for my students. She had written, they're beginning to see that history isn't just about famous people and major events, but about ordinary people making extraordinary choices. That was exactly what I had hoped to accomplish. The Underground Railroad wasn't just about Harriet Tubman and other famous conductors. It was about thousands of ordinary people who had risked their lives and livelihoods to help others escape slavery. People like my ancestors, who had opened their home to strangers and put their own safety at risk because they believed it was the right thing to do. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Just finished reviewing the plans for the new education center. It's going to be incredible. Grandmother would be so proud of what we've built together. He was right. The education center, scheduled to open next spring, would triple our capacity for school groups and provide space for workshops, lectures, and special programs. It was being designed to blend seamlessly with the historical character of the property while providing all the modern amenities needed for effective education programming. Another text came in, this one from Sophia. The PBS documentary about our site is going to air next month as part of their Black History Month programming. National exposure. I smiled, thinking about how different these text conversations were from the angry phone calls I had received from my cousins in the weeks after the will reading. We had gone from bitter rivals to genuine partners, united by a shared commitment to preserving and sharing history. As I settled into bed, I picked up the journal I had been keeping since taking over the house, a record of discoveries, challenges, successes, and reflections on this unexpected journey. I wrote a few lines about the day's events, then closed the journal and turned off the light. But sleep didn't come immediately. I lay in the darkness, listening to the familiar sounds of the old house settling around me, and thought about the path that had led me here. 18 months ago, I had been the family disappointment, the impractical dreamer who chose books over business, history over profit, preservation over progress. When I had stood up at that family meeting and said I had a gift too, their laughter had stung because it reflected my own insecurities about my choices. But Grandmother Evelyn had seen something in me that I hadn't seen in myself. She had recognized that my love of history and my commitment to preservation weren't weaknesses, but strengths. She had trusted me with her most precious possession because she knew I would understand its true value. The brass key had unlocked more than just a hidden room. It had unlocked my potential, my purpose, my place in the family and in the world. Tomorrow's commemoration would mark not just the anniversary of Grandmother's death, but the completion of her vision. The house she had loved was now a place where thousands of people came each year to learn about courage, sacrifice, and the ongoing struggle for freedom and justice. The heritage site had become more than just a museum. It was a living memorial to the people who had risked everything for freedom, and a reminder that ordinary individuals can make extraordinary differences when they choose to act on their principles. As I finally drifted off to sleep, I thought about the visitors who would come tomorrow and in the days and years to come. They would walk through the same rooms where escaped slaves had found shelter, follow the same tunnel that had led to freedom, and read the same messages of hope carved into stone walls. And maybe, like the students in Alabama, some of them would be inspired to learn more about their own histories, to understand their own connections to the ongoing story of America's struggle to live up to its ideals. The next morning dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for the commemoration ceremony. I woke early and walked through the house one more time, making sure everything was ready for our guests. In the main parlor, we had set up a display of photographs showing the transformation of the house over the past year, before and after shots of the museum conversion. Pictures of visitors exploring the tunnel, images of school groups learning about the Underground Railroad. But the centerpiece of the display was a letter we had received just the week before from the great-great-granddaughter of one of the families, who had helped operate the Underground Railroad network. She had written to thank us for preserving the site and to share a family story that had been passed down through generations. My ancestor wrote in her diary about the brave families who opened their homes to freedom seekers. The letter read, She specifically mentioned a big white house with kind people who never turned anyone away. I believe she was writing about your house, and I want you to know how grateful our family is that you have preserved this sacred place. Sacred place. That phrase had stayed with me since reading the letter. That's what Whitmore House had become, not just a museum or tourist attraction, but a sacred place where people could connect with the courage and sacrifice of those who had come before. By mid-morning, guests were beginning to arrive for the commemoration. Local officials, historians, preservationists, and many of the descendants who had become part of our extended community gathered in the garden where Grandmother Evelyn had spent so many hours tending her plants and planning for the future. I stood at the podium we had set up near her favorite rose bushes and looked out at the faces of people who had become partners in preserving this important piece of history. A year ago today, we lost Evelyn Whitmore, I began. But we didn't lose her vision or her values. We didn't lose her commitment to preserving the past for the future. In fact, through all of you, through this site, through the thousands of people who have visited and learned and been inspired, her legacy is stronger than ever. I talked about the discoveries we had made, the partnerships we had built, the impact we had achieved. But mostly, I talked about the lesson that Grandmother Evelyn had taught me, that preserving history isn't about living in the past, but about learning from it to build a better future. The people who carved their names in the walls of our tunnel weren't just escaping slavery, I said. They were claiming their humanity, asserting their right to freedom, refusing to accept that their circumstances defined their possibilities. Their courage reminds us that each of us has the power to make choices that matter, to stand up for what's right, to create change in our own time and place. After the ceremony, as guests toured the house and shared their own stories and connections to the Underground Railroad, I found myself standing in the hidden room where this journey had begun. The brass key sat in its display case, no longer a mystery, but a symbol of discovery and transformation. Marcus joined me there, looking around at the archives and research materials that filled the space. "You know what I keep thinking about?" he said. "That day when you put the key on the table and everything changed, I was so sure you were making a mistake, so convinced that you couldn't handle this responsibility. And now I think Grandmother knew exactly what she was doing. She knew that you were the only one who could see the real treasure here. Not the monetary value, but the historical value. Not what the house could become, but what it already was." Sophia appeared in the doorway, having overheard our conversation. "I owe you an apology to Emma. I was so focused on development potential that I almost missed the real potential, the chance to preserve something irreplaceable and share it with the world. We all learned something," I said. "I learned that I was capable of more than I thought. You learned that preservation can be just as rewarding as development. Marcus learned that the past can be just as valuable as the future. And we all learned that families can change and grow," Sophia added. "That old resentments don't have to define relationships forever." As the day wound down and the last guests departed, I sat in Grandmother Evelyn's garden one more time, thinking about the year that had passed and the years to come. The heritage site was established now, financially stable and educationally successful. The National Historic Landmark designation was almost certain, which would provide additional protection and resources. The Education Center would expand our capacity to serve school groups and researchers. The documentary and other media coverage would bring national attention to our work. But beyond all the practical successes, I had found something even more valuable. A sense of purpose that filled my life with meaning, a family that had been healed and strengthened by working together, and a connection to history that reminded me daily of the courage and sacrifice of those who had come before. The brass key that had started this journey now represented something different to me. It wasn't just the key that had unlocked a hidden room or revealed family secrets. It was the key to understanding that our choices matter, that preservation is an act of hope, and that sometimes the greatest treasures are the ones that can't be measured in dollars and cents. As the sun set behind the old oak trees, I walked through the house one final time, turning off lights and securing doors. Tomorrow would bring new visitors, new discoveries, new opportunities to share the stories that needed to be told. But tonight, I was content to sit in the quiet house and feel the presence of all those who had lived here before me, family members and refugees, freedom seekers and freedom givers, all of them part of the continuing story of courage and hope that the Whitmore Underground Railroad Heritage Site now preserved for future generations. The laughter from that first family meeting seemed like a lifetime ago. My cousins had laughed when I said I had a gift too, but now we all understood that the greatest gifts aren't always the ones that come wrapped in pretty packages. Sometimes they come disguised as responsibilities, as challenges, as opportunities to grow beyond what we thought we were capable of. Grandmother Evelyn's gift to me hadn't just been a house and a fortune. It had been the chance to discover who I really was and what I was truly capable of achieving. It had been the opportunity to transform not just a building, but a family, not just preserve history, but make history. And that was a gift that would keep giving for generations to come.